Welcome to the Coach Speak podcast, built for coaches, by coaches, hosted by Jamie Bolton and Dustin Martin. Sponsored by Ray Crowther, providing the nation's best athletic training equipment since 1932. And R4 Football Systems. Accelerate everything by decoding the game.
Hey guys, welcome back to Coach Speak. Dustin Martin here with Jamie Bolton, special guest and Coach Tony Holler tonight. Before we get going, I want to shout out to our sponsors, Team Builder, Tsunami Bar Sports, and Pro Quick Draw.
Yeah, guys, today we have one of the most influential speed minds in all of sports. If you've ever heard of the phrase, feed the cats, not fatigue, you already know his work. Our guest has spent over 4 decades coaching and teaching, is an Illinois track and field Hall of Famer, and has completely flipped the traditional strength and conditioning model on its head. Instead of grinding athletes into the ground with conditioning, he believes in training speed with intent, protecting fast twitch athletes, and creating a competitive environment that makes kids faster every day. His philosophy has spread from high school track to football programs across the country and even into the college of professional sports. We're fired up to bring on the creator of Feed the Cats, Tony Holler. Welcome to Coach Speak.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
Awesome, Coach. Well, what does the phrase feed the cats actually mean?
Yeah, a lot of people think I'm a master brander or something like that, but really it was, I was 40 and I'm a coach's kid. My dad was a 47-year basketball coach. 2 of my uncles were terrific football coaches on my mom's side. So I grew up as this kid that, thought about nothing but sports. And so I coached the way I was coached, the way traditional coaches coached. That's what we all do. We parent the way we were parented. We teach the way we were taught. That's just anchor bias. And, what we learn first is what we identify with and continue. And then we say, trust the process. Anytime things go bad, trust the process. And so I blew up the process when I was 40, because at that time I had just lost my job as a head basketball coach, was hired by the same school board 1 month earlier as the head track coach because they couldn't find anybody. And here I was with 4 little kids and broke, and I couldn't move. So I became a track coach, not by choice, but by happenstance. And so after reasonable success, even a state championship and stuff, I blew it all up when I was 40 and said that we're not going to train like other track teams train. Instead, we are going to basically, in practice, have a NFL combine training type of atmosphere. The idea was that I wanted to attract the fast twitch athletes that would make me a good track coach to my program. And those athletes don't like to go out and run 12 laps. Those guys don't like meaningless crap on the track. So what I called cats, it was just a thing that popped in my head. Like, I'm going to feed those cats. I'm going to feed those cats. And it worked perfectly. All the fast kids in my school wanted to be on my track team because of the way we trained, because practice was the best part of their day. And they never experienced that in any sport ever, that practice is miserable across the United States in every sport. And if you could ever make practice the best part of a kid's day, kids will perform for you in practice, which is the key to performing in competition. And so the thing that I didn't realize was that by training specifically for speed and explosiveness, that the kids that improved the most were those generic kids. Those kids that I never considered a cat. They couldn't dunk. They weren't the guys catching touchdown passes, but there were these random kids, like somebody from the band or something who'd never been exposed to athletic training, came out, enjoyed it, got really fast. Now, they're never going to be your phenoms, but they sure make you a good track coach. So what I started with cats was the idea that cats were the fast twitch athletes that we all want. What I figured out was that every kid should be trained like a cat.
I love that.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times we've watched film and said, they got some cats, boys. Like they got some cats. And it's so cool to kind of hear your story to that, because, we've said it on here before, it's been a while, but sports is the only part of a kid's day they choose to do. They don't choose to go to class. They don't choose to go to school. They choose to go to sports. And I think that means something, especially if you have a kid who in football, you're relying on to be a two-way player who maybe loves playing offense but doesn't necessarily love playing defense. And I think if you have that kind of same philosophy with that, I think you can, like you said, create that buy-in. What would you say with your time in athletics is one of the most common mistakes that football programs in particular make when it comes to trying to train kids to get faster?
Well, I call it the disease of more. I think as a football coach, they all have the disease and they always will, but it's important to kind of laugh at it and hold yourself back, because what happens as a football coach is that if you have that disease of more, your kids are going to be 1 mile an hour slower at the end of the year, and you will probably lose 20 to 30% of your players to injury. Whereas if you do less but do it better and prioritize speed, some magic starts to happen where injuries disappear. And as every other team is getting 1 mile an hour slower, which if you know anything about miles per hour, 1 mile an hour for an athlete is a game changer. It is huge. And so if you could get your team 1 mile an hour faster, while other teams are becoming 1 mile an hour slower, now we have a 2 mile an hour differential. Plus, you're playing with your starters in the championship game, and they're playing without 5 of their best players because they have hurt people. Now, in the strength and conditioning world, now don't be hurt about this, but I say the two biggest problems with strength and conditioning is strength and conditioning. And what I mean by that is that, yes, the weight room is important and it almost needs to be the church of football. I understand that. I understand that weightlifting is really, really important, but weightlifting without sprinting becomes a negative. Kids will get hurt and they will get slower. The ability to move in a movement sport is still the number one thing, even for the bigs. My favorite topic is big cats. I love to talk about 300-pound offensive tackles and how the ones that are fast in a straight line running a 40 get millions of dollars, and the ones that are slow don't get to play, even if they're great big and they're pretty good football players. Now, the conditioning part, when I say conditioning, some S&C people say everything's conditioning. No, I'm a coach's kid. I know when coaches talk about conditioning, what they're talking about. They're talking about grinding through fatigue, intentionally fatiguing their athletes and running them until their gas tank is empty, and then say, run on fumes. And by doing that, they ruin the next day, which starts a downward spiral. And if they ever time sprints, which those coaches will never time sprints, those conditioning freak coaches will never time a sprint because they don't want to know how slow they're making their own players. They don't want to know that truth. And so part of sprint-based football is that we do time sprints a couple times a week. We do it before practice. It replaces the warm-up. It's a better warm-up than anything I've ever seen. So those are the big things I preach about.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think too, another thing with those big cats is that it really, I've seen too in programs where those big guys start losing a lot of weight. And if those big cats are now medium-sized cats and they're more susceptible to injury, now we got major issues because a 260-pound kid is now a 240-pound kid, in that 15th week or whatever it may be. So that's another thing too with that over conditioning, especially, on into the season. I think that's crazy. But I love that you're saying that. So I think we're going to kind of transition into our first segment, really talk about the problems with that traditional conditioning model and get a little bit deeper into that. But what actually happens to the body when athletes are constantly training in that fatigued state?
Well, nothing good. And Lombardi said something that is so true, that fatigue makes cowards of us all.
Hmm.
And that was like 58 years ago. And coaches forever have said that. And I believe it. I totally believe it. But my answer to that is different than everybody else, because everybody else says that. So we are going to get constantly fatigued in every practice, maybe twice a day back in the 2-a-day world. We're going to get so damn tired that we become accustomed to fatigue.
Mm.
But really, you're just making kids tired and you're making them soft. And the opposite can be true as well. If they are not fatigued, and if they are sprint trained, and if they show up enthusiastically loving practice every day, the practice is not the shit you have to go through, excuse my language, the hell you have to go through to get to the game. Instead, is the best part of your day, and practice, where tired is the enemy, not the goal, becomes enjoyable. You don't have to coast for the first hour and a half because you're not going to get crushed at the end of practice. You're going to be sent home with gas in your tank, with a little bounce in your step. I think you sleep better at night.
Yeah.
For sure, college kids that are overworked drink more than kids that are not crushed in practice. And so I think sleep is the forgotten gold mine of athleticism, and I love talking sleep, but there are just so many benefits. And I think it's important to say this, that a lot of football coaches say, I don't like that feed the cat stuff because it's all about sprinting. And in football, it's all acceleration. Okay, it is. You're right. And we seldom sprint in a straight line. Hey, right on both accounts. However, the most extreme movement in the human experience is sprinting in a straight line as fast as you can and getting timed. And as we do that, we raise the ceiling of the CNS.
Mm-hmm.
When we raise the ceiling of the CNS, all things improve. Your ability to decelerate improve, to accelerate improve, your ability to change directions. And people say, oh, well, agility is different. Not really, because I would rather do agility with a fast guy than a slow guy.
Yeah, right.
So
right.
I think speed
Yeah.
speed is the priority. I say it's the tide that lifts all boats. That as we get faster, we actually get better in the weight room. As we get faster, we're more athletic. My business partner, Les Spellman, who is a rock star, Les says that speed is global. In other words, speed does not exist on an island. And I think too many football coaches come from a background of being a step slow. They were not the sprint champs. They were not the wide receiver. Instead, they were the try-hard guy that came early, stayed late, and tried to win every conditioning session and loved their coach and hung on every word and never missed anything in all their years as an athlete. And the harder they worked, it seemed like the slower they got, which is true. And so therefore they think the speed is some genetic thing that if you either have it or you don't. And so coaches abandon the idea that we can get faster. And people say, well, the weight room isn't, no, strength is genetic too. But we improve strength in the weight room.
Exactly.
Speed is genetic, but we can improve that. Jumping is genetic. Even intelligence is genetic. But underdeveloped intelligence is not smart. I mean, you still have to read and work. So these things are really important. And I call it revolutionary, but a coach in Houston told me one time, stop saying that. It's really not revolutionary. It's just advanced common sense.
Right.
And I'm like, I think you're right. We should not have to be arguing this stuff. The speed and the ability to show up every day to practice in a totally charged state makes us a better player.
Yeah, and two things come to my mind when you say that. The first one is kind of going back to that practice thing. Yeah, we can definitely see when players are kind of taking it easy in that individual part, like say, like, we're blocking practice, ND group, team, whatever, then conditioning. Well, that Andy time, we really want them at their peak performance, because if you're not, you're going to develop these bad habits. So I think all those things are kind of go hand in hand. The athlete knows and can anticipate, look, I can give max effort and coach is going to give me an opportunity to rest and not be in a fatigue state. Then when you go play the game, you're probably going to look like a much better coached team. You're going to have better stances. You're going to have better starts. You're going to have better technique at the line. You're going to at a point of attack versus like leaning on a guy, for like an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. The second thing that comes to mind is kind of going back to the game of football has changed. I would say as far as the methodology and maybe philosophy and theory behind sprint-based football as well, because before everybody played inside freaking 12 feet, it seems like. And now the game is wide open and we do a lot more sprinting, the last couple of decades than maybe the decades previous when, Vince Lombardi's running, a seal here, and then hit it in the alley. Heck,
Mhm.
even Bart Starr and Dang, all them guys had to sprint at some point too. But yeah, I see both of those things, but I'm glad we're moving in that direction.
Yeah, I totally agree, Coach. You really hit it. It's like, and Jamie mentioned it, when there's a 2-hour practice and the kid knows you're going to run them afterwards, the entire 2 hours, you're going to get probably 50% from that kid. And the only way
Mhm.
you're going to get more than that is just to scream at them and try to yell. And I think the kids are just preparing themselves for, my body's getting ready to be drained again, and I think that's super important. What would you say? Let's say that there's a football coach who's just worried that, but man, we do it for straight toughness. Like, that's why we do it. It's not conditioning. It's not. What would you kind of say to a coach who feels like, man, like, I feel like we might be less tough if we stop and take that out of our program?
Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head. That is going to be with traditional football. And football is a weird sport now. It's most traditional sport there is, the most patriotic. I don't know what it has to do with patriotism, but it is the most religious sport. I mean, like uh, people say prayers as a team in football before a game. I don't know if my track team never did that. I mean, there
Probably
is
because you're going to get hurt, man. You might want to say
maybe
a
that
few
is.
prayers, man.
Yeah, maybe the prayers are
It's a
needed
violent deal.
because you
Yeah,
may die in the game or something.
yeah.
But anyway, football is a strange sport like that, and I think coaches really see creating fatigue as creating toughness. And once again, toughness and fatigue have an inverse relationship. That you talk about those guys for 2 hours that are kind of, like they're going in third gear. That's pretty much what practice has always been, third gear. And then we try to play in fifth gear in a game. And every coach that does that still says, guys, we're going to play like we practice. They know that quality is more important than quantity, but yet they still do it. Another one of the reasons why they're in third gear on Wednesday is because of what you did to them on Tuesday. So I call practices in the traditional sense, either in the survival zone where people are trying to just survive practice, or the coasting zone, which is like, I need to save. I need to save. And in a feed the cats situation, we want to be in what I call the performance zone. We want to practice in fifth gear. To do that, we can't burn the steak on Tuesday and then have a great practice on Wednesday. To do that, we cannot have a 4-hour practice. To do that, we have to give guys a chance to walk in practice, which I know goes against all the laws of football. But if you watch a game of football at the high school level, if the game lasts 2 hours and 35 minutes, players are playing, if they play one way, they play 5 minutes of football, and they're standing for 2.5 hours. But yet our practices don't reflect that. It's like, no walking on my field. I mean, I've seen coaches that want guys like run in place on the sideline or something. No, it's the other thing. Yeah, every play is a 5-second play followed by a recovery. And then after 6 or 7 plays, you go to the sideline. And even guys playing both ways. People say, well, they need twice the conditioning. No, they need no conditioning. If you have Travis Hunter, do you think that they worked him harder than everybody else at Colorado? If you do, you're wrong because they gave him days off. It's the opposite. A two-way player is one of your best kids. You need him twice as much as you need everybody else. And so if he is fatigued and getting injured, that's a really bad omen for your team. So it kind of turns things upside down. A lot of these thoughts are counterintuitive until coaches start doing it. And what they find, let's get back to the toughness thing. There's 5 coaches that I know that are the earliest adopters of sprint-based football. 4 high school coaches, 1 college coach. And they've been doing it for like 6 years, and they have a combined record of 342 and 28. And the college coach, Pedro Aruza at Randolph-Macon in Virginia, he's been doing it, and they're the number 3 team in Division III during that time. And his first 3 practices are 60 minutes, 60 minutes, 60 minutes, 4th day off. That's not traditional, guys. That's crazy. And what I love to ask these coaches, they're sprint based. Are your kids soft because of the way you do things? And they almost want to come at me and say, hell no, we are violent because we take time off, because we love the game, because we are at full physical capability. And they don't skip the weight room. They're faster than the other team. They love it more than the other team. And so I would argue that you can be more violent by taking time off. One quick story, Dillingham at Arizona State, they won a bloodbath against Iowa State this year, and they had a bye week coming up. And he says, I've never done this, but I'm going to give my guys 7 days off. Most coaches would be like, hey, yeah, we can do double sessions during that bye week. No, 7 days off, no football. And why did he do that? He said, because I want them to come back violent.
Yeah.
We're talking at the highest level.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, one of the other pieces, it's not, and a lot of this might be just steel manning the coming from a coach, right? Perspective, not that I disagree with anything, but like, what if a coach were to say, well, we need more reps to get more to become more skilled at football, not necessarily from a peak performance standpoint. Do you have coaches that, and maybe your system, helps coaches kind of navigate that? Talk a little bit about like a coach that would say, well, we really need a lot of volume from a skill standpoint, not necessarily from a speed and conditioning standpoint. How would you kind of answer that?
Great question.
I think there's two ways to answer that. One is that what you want are reps at high quality.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Yep.
So we learn by stories. 4x1 exchanges. 4x1 is my race as a track and field coach. And I used to say, okay, let's do like 10 exchanges. Okay, let's do 10 of them. They're all crap. When I got really smart about 10 years ago, I started saying, give me one perfect one. When the intent is to be perfect, and as soon as you hit that perfect one, you're done, or maybe you have one more. I mean, it changes everything. So coaches that are oftentimes are have this rep mentality. They are doing everything in third gear. If you are a 90-mile-an-hour pitcher in high school, you might play in the bigs if you can throw 100. So how are you going to get there? You going to get there by 1,000 reps of 50 mile an hour pitch? No. You're going to throw twice a week, and you're going to let it rip. That's how we get faster sprinting or get better throwing. As a boxer, you going to throw 1,000 half-ass punches, or are you going to throw 50 great ones? I think you're a better boxer if you have great punches. And so I think that in a speed and explosion sport, which is football, at all positions, including the line, all that stuff, it's really, really important to understand that perfect reps are where it's at. Now, in my system, we have a high-low type of approach. I call my high praxis performance days. They are gamified. They look like a game. You tighten up your laces a little tighter on those days. There's more recovery in between efforts because we want game-like efforts all the time. Performance day is the high day. Fundamental day is the low day. Performance is high, fundamental is low. So you can get a lot of those low speed reps in a fundamental day because you're not trying to be fifth gear, hair on fire type of stuff. You're trying, mental reps. You're trying to improve your fundamentals. And when I explain this to coaches, they tell me, well, like, I think all my practices are kind of like fundamental days.
Right. You never get that amped up. I love that, coach, because just from a psychological, and maybe it's actually a neurological component to this, is like, I actually, in the last couple of years, we do these drills like EDDs. Let's say it's like perfect, pat and go, all this stuff, right? Well, we get out there and it's like, man, we're going bang, 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 bang. Well, it took us like so much longer to get good at that drill when we try to do it faster and get 1,000 reps. So what I actually started doing the last couple of years is kind of talking what you're saying, go in first gear or even slower than that and teach the fine tune, like walk the drill real quick, like walk the drill. I want you in a perfect, perfect posture, whatever it is, and then do that and then ramp it up slowly, because actually neurologically, the synapses, that myelin, I know I'm getting kind of nerdy, it actually starts to get thicker. And so that's what we call like muscle memory. And now we're in our OTAs, and in week 2, we're doing things that would have taken us all the way to like spring ball to be proficient at, if that makes sense. That, like, you're kind of speaking my language.
Yeah, and I think if you can imagine doing those teaching and fundamental, not worrying about being fast on let's say a Monday, and then on Tuesday you come out and do those things at a performance level where the kids love it. And then on Wednesday, you go back to a fundamental day and you're teaching and all those things. And then on Thursday, you come back. I call it a half of a performance day where you're not going to go an hour and 45 minutes. You're going to go less than an hour, but you're still going to be like game-like speeds. And I also believe strongly a couple of the coaches that have adopted my ideas actually do their Thursday. I love this before school, which gives it's 36 hours before the game. And one other thing that sprint-based football coaches do, they limit their on the field warm up to 25 minutes. That's crazy, right? Have you seen teams that have warmed up for 90 minutes?
Yes, sir.
They play like 2 games. They play like 2 games before they play the game.
When I was a
jog distance, when I was
a high school player, we played this high school. They went through a 45-minute practice before the game. They're hitting the sled. They were doing it was crazy. But coach, you're kind of speaking to me and got me thinking a little bit more in the football realm. It's like, okay, at practice, you hardly ever go live because you're always worried about getting someone hurt. But tell me this, it's like when you think about it, if we said, hey guys, we're going to go 8 plays of inside run full speed, tackle to the ground, versus 16 to 22 plays of thud and, like you said, third gear, you probably could get hurt more with more reps, more volume, and less speed, if that makes sense. So I think in listening to you talk about the fundamental and the performance days of practicing, I even think you could structure your practice to have periods that are, hey, this is a fundamental period. This is a performance period. And that's kind of how I think about Indy. Like, I'll watch some guys Indy and it looks like they're training for the war. And I'm like, no, man, that's not what it's about here. We're going to learn fundamentals, keys, where we need to be, and technique on how to execute it. Like when we leave Indy, I want to be fresh, because when we hit group or we hit inside run or whatever, I want us to be, full go. Let's go. So that's kind of where my brain was thinking as you were talking about those things.
And that's brilliant. That's brilliant, because I also teach that inside a performance day, it cannot be everything high. There has to be a wave-like action inside of that performance day. And so you can go fundamental and then high, and then fundamental, then high. You cannot be high for 2 hours. I mean, like, you just can't do that. And I love the fact you brought up injuries, because I think probably one of the 10 biggest things about sprint-based football is that we have found that fast, healthy kids that love practice, who did not have the steak burnt the day before, are almost bulletproof. They don't get hurt. And then when you start practicing like Curt Cignetti does, where he goes 30 minutes on Monday and Friday, and he goes an hour and 45 on the other 3 days, he practices less than anybody else in the entire country, and then he dominates the entire country. It opens some eyes. And then another sprint-based coach, a guy named Matt Walker, I love the guy, from Wisconsin River Falls, Division III. I spoke on a panel at AFCA with him, and I was just really excited to meet him because I'd heard good things about him. And he said he was excited to meet me because he adopted my ideas going into last season because of injury problems the year before. And what they did was remarkable. In the first game of the year, they started 22 guys. In the championship game, they started the same 22. I heard a wow, and that should be our response, because that ain't normal, guys.
No.
So you're doing something right. And what you're doing is you're shortening practice, which means fewer collisions, to your point, Coach Martin. Fewer collisions, shortening practice. Practices are better because kids are not dragging their ass in. And this is another crazy thing, is that if your kids are dragging, you mentioned that coaches have to cuss them, punish them, yell at them. They have to scream for effort because they can't perform. All they can do is give you effort. And I think it ruins a coach's life because they go home at night and then they kick their dog and yell at their wife. And it's hard to turn off that tyrannical, like drive, push type of mentality when you go home and try to relax. And so then they drink a lot of bourbon and that doesn't help them either. So those things I think are really important. And that's why I get so passionate talking about this stuff.
Well, same thing with the kids. I mean, the kids are getting yelled at, the negativity, and it's just the morale drops with the kids. And now you may have built this barrier between you and the kid and building that relationship. And I think there's a lot. It's deeper than just, I guess we're feeding them more than just the proper structure. It's deeper than that. And I think that can speak to any coach, I think, especially me too, and trying to figure that out. But go ahead, Dustin.
No, well, I think it's also important for anyone listening to this, because I'm reminding myself this. We're not talking about mental reps or technique work. We're talking about just full speed performance, period. It's like, guys, there's still nothing wrong with doing walkthroughs. There's still nothing wrong with going through film study. And it's like, and I think that's where a lot of people kind of look at this and
misconception
go, it's a misconception of we're going to dial back everything. Like, we're just going to work less and not put the work in. And I think it's important that we're just talking about the speed, the performance on the field.
It's the intent behind, it's like that maximum intent that coach talks about. So talk to us a little bit about like what that, and we don't want to give too much away here, but like, why is maximum intent so important? And for, I guess, speed development, like from a scientific perspective, like why can't we just, what is max intent? I guess we need to define that so coaches can know what that may look like on the field, if that makes sense. Like define that.
Let's talk about max intent from a speed standpoint and from a practice standpoint. From a speed standpoint, that means we run speed training should be the priority of a football season. It sounds weird, I know, but it's never the majority. The majority is going to be football in the weight room. But the speed training stuff, if you're really, really efficient with it, you can get done with a speed workout for 60 guys in 20 minutes. And just do that instead of your warm-up. Their CNS is on fire and they're ready to go. Plus, you have the added benefit of knowing if your kids are faster or slower than usual. That should be that is a barometer of health. Slow players are tired players, and tired players cannot defend themselves in collisions. So maximum intent in sprinting is sprinting less than 5 seconds. Anything more than 5 seconds is not a sprint. So that's why the 40-yard dash is perfect. That's why I love the 10-yard fly, because you can easily change that to miles per hour, something that kids can grab hold of and really understand, and they get really competitive with their miles per hour. So maximum intent for sprinting is pretty easy. Just time them. Just time them. Now, maximum intent in football, the reason why it's so important in football is because a game played well has 60 offensive plays and 60 defensive plays of max intent.
Right.
Of max intent. Not a single play is a third gear play. Not a single one. Now, there is great built-in recovery. Like I said, if you're a running back, you get to play 5 minutes of the game. You get to play 5 minutes if you're playing every offensive play. And you get 30 seconds in between plays. If you're like in a hurry up, people say, we snap it every 8 seconds. No, you don't. No, there's no team that snaps every 8 seconds. Now, you may attempt to, that's fine, but there are penalties and there's stoppages of play and there's referees sorting things out. And the average drive lasts for 6 plays. And then you're watching forever. I mean, you understand what I'm talking about. When you come out of the game, it's like, when am I going to get back in?
This is cold like over here.
And so,
especially if your defense isn't very good and you're on an offensive player.
Isn't that the
They'll
worst?
be out there eight
another first.
plays.
They got 3rd down. Everybody runs up to this. Oh crap! They got another 1st down. Hey, 3rd down again, guys.
Every coach wants high intent in practice, but this is the problem. They are a slave to the traditions of football. anchor bias. They're going to coach the way they were coached. When you're a young assistant, you have to adopt every idea of the head coach. You don't stay on the staff long if you're button heads with the head coach. So you just say everything that he says, repeat it. Just say, coach, you're brilliant, And so we grow up in this football system where there are no lone wolves out there. There's nobody like me. I was an assistant coach for 25 years and I was terrible. I was a good assistant, but I was too opinionated for the head coach. He would have much rather hired a 22-year-old that would just echo everything he said. That's what head coaches want. And that's what we buy into when we join a football staff. But what head coaches need to figure out is that in a max intent game like football is, we have to find ways to developing max intent in practice. And it cannot be done for 3 hours a night after night after night.
Because if you're in third gear at practice, you're probably going to have a hard time getting to that fifth gear for most of the plays on Friday.
And you know what else? You cramp up.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Everybody thinks cramping is somehow Gatorade related. No, it is third gear practice, fifth gear games.
Yep.
If people say, "Oh, it was hot on that first game." Well, it was hot in all your practices too, and nobody cramped. Nobody cramped in your practices. Everybody cramped in your game. Sprint-based football teams typically have 0 cramps in the first game, whereas their opponents may have 10.
Because they're getting gain speed reps at practice. They're in fifth gear at practice.
Their nervous system is not prepared for the demands of the game.
Yes, sir. And shout out to Sean Powell at Cannon School. I think I know he taught me that, Jamie. I don't know if you had heard that at Cannon, but Coach, we would max velo sprint twice a week. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, how much max velocity sprinting what do you suggest, or talk a little bit about that?
Well, when I created a thing a couple years ago for Les Spellman's group, USR, called the Atomic Speed Workout. And if anybody wants to see it, just type in Atomic Speed Workout, and I got videos and stuff. They're all free. And I call it Atomic Speed Workouts because I just read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, which should be required learning for every educator, every student, blah, 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 parent, whatever. It's a fantastic book about creating habits and breaking habits. And my Atomic Speed Workout, this is the hook. It takes you 15 minutes and you're going to do 60 seconds of work, and you will feel better afterwards than you felt before, which is exactly what you want out of a warm-up. Even though a lot of traditional football warm-ups actually try to get their team tired for 40 minutes. It's so weird. So the whole idea that we're going to do maybe the Atomic Speed Workout instead of our traditional warm-up twice a week is really all you have to do. Now, it may last more than 15 minutes it's going to last 35 minutes if you have one set of timing gates. But I would suggest people buy 3 sets of timing gates. I suggest OVR because it's just so simple. The OVR sprint, 3 sets of timing gates will cost you $1,600. You do the 10 speed drills at an 11, which means you're trying to do every speed drill better than you've ever done one ever in your life. You do 10 speed drills in 10 minutes, and then you go to 3 lines with 3 sets of timing gates, and you run about 30 yards into a 10, and you time your 10-yard fly, and you yell out the time and write it down. And by doing that, this is crazy, but Garrett Moeller, one of the founding fathers of the movement, he coaches in Minnesota, and they had a 30-game winning streak. They're 55-5 since they've started doing this stuff. And I think it's just so important to understand that his teams in the last 3 years have improved by the same amount every year throughout the season. 0.7 of a mile an hour on average with all 60 kids. They are 0.7 of a mile an hour faster in their final week as they were their first week. I was just in communication today with probably the hottest S&C coach in America today, Derek Owings, at Indiana, obviously the sprint base guru, Signetti. Well, Owings now is making, I think, over $1 million, I heard, at Tennessee, and it's probably the most epic hire in the entire nation, bringing him to Tennessee because Tennessee has been old school for a long time, and he is going to be a sprint priority guy, and it only takes a couple times a week, and it's just such a incredible return on investment that I just don't understand why anybody would not do it.
Yeah, it's like the guy there was an article, I guess, several years ago. It's a football coach, I think in Arkansas. Like, he was the guy that always, like, he would never
Kevin
punt,
Kelly,
and, it's like, yeah, so
Kevin
then he'd
Kelly.
always go for 2, and
Yep.
I think there's, like, this societal external pressure on guys to be like, "I think this makes a lot of sense, but I don't know if I'm willing to put my foot out there because if the performance isn't there, then that's something that people are gonna point to because that's the easiest one to point to. Like, well, this guy never freaking goes out there and they don't I saw them, they don't do no conditioning. You know how some parents gonna say, "Man, fire that guy." So I think there's a lot of that, I think because the parents so I think as a coach, you're
Yeah.
gonna have to sell this to your program
Oh,
beyond, and I think that's part of being a good coach and a good leader is being able to communicate and articulate, "This is why we do it. These are the results that we expect from this." And I think that's where I think coaches could gain an advantage and a competitive advantage if they figure out a way to sell everybody on that system.
Coach Bolton, you could not be more correct on that because there have been people basically I go around, I convert coaches. I
Yeah,
convert
yeah,
coaches. I tell them you have to lose your religion and I'm gonna convert you to a better way to do it that's gonna make you a better coach, your team's better, you're gonna win more. And it's difficult because they innately understand that 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 the disease of more pays off for them. That if they practice longer and harder than their opponents and they go 3-6, they may keep their job because that guy works his butt off.
Mm.
And so all that hard work by football coaches is kind of like job security.
yeah,
Uh, and like
Yeah.
3-6, you may keep your job, but if you don't condition them and your practices are like Signetti's, never 2 hours
Mhm.
and sometimes 30 minutes, and you're doing this fluffy sprint stuff. Well, if you go 6-3, there may be a special board meeting to can you.
yeah, oh yeah,
And that is the truth.
Yep.
That
mhm,
is the truth. So you better be somebody who can articulate this. And I've even seen head college coaches, believe it or not, in consults that I do with them one-on-one, who say, I love all this stuff, but I have a couple staff members that might mutiny.
wow,
And
yeah.
I'm like, oh my
Wow.
God. You know,
Yeah.
so that stuff is real.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that I've seen, especially at the high school level, that has really come around, just an example of this is what we do and how we do it is, I think coaches are finally out there enough people saying, "Hey guys, it doesn't take working all week, again, being away from your family to be successful in football." That's more. I've seen that more in the last 5 to 10 years than anything. It's like, hey man, like here's how we do the weekend. Saturday's completely off. We come in on Sundays for 3 to 4 hours, and that's what
Wow.
we do. Because 20, 30 years ago, back when I was in diapers, like it was, you're going to come in on Saturday all day and you're going to come in on Sunday all day. And I think that's just an example of where we've evolved and adapt. But I think there are some realms where we are slowly, but it's not as fast. That's just the quickest one that I have seen. And I think the more I listen and talk to people, sprint-based football is starting to shift. And we all know Indiana did it. So now there's probably going to be 30% more of football teams that do it this year because, well, since Indiana did it and they won the national championship, it should be good enough for us to do. And
Well,
that's just
I
how I
agree.
see it
I'm
happening.
I'm with you, and I think, what is it? Pride comes before the fall. I mean, I
Yeah.
think when you think about, okay, we're gonna have the hardest and toughest program in the state, that's a prideful statement, I think, in a lot of ways. I don't think there's a lot of, like, hubris there. I think when you are doing it for the right reasons, you should not worry about external pressure, and I know that's hard. That's easier said than done, but if you know that it's true and that's the right thing to do, then I think you gotta give it a shot, not only for you, but just for your kids. I mean, if you're worried about job security, then you're probably worrying about the wrong things. If you're sitting there worried about, "Am I gonna keep my job?" You're probably not focused on what you need to focus on. And I know it's easier said than done, but I think for a lot of guys listening, man, you got to go with what you believe in, not just because your mentor may have said it. And I've seen some of my mentors actually go through that transition themselves. They're coaching back in the 80s,
Mhm.
and now I've seen them kind of transition out of, we're meeting at 7 a.m. on Saturday and working until 2 p.m. and then coming back in on Sundays. Like they've kind of moved away from that. So hats off to them. But yeah, there's a lot of that. And I think getting rid of that notion of we have to outwork people and maybe work smarter is what I'm kind of interested in now, that I'm kind of thinking for myself, if that makes sense.
I think that if a lot of people point to, the traditional programs and say, well, they have a lot of success with it. I'm like, I wish I could show you a list of the graveyard of football coaches who did the same damn thing. In
Mm.
matter of fact, I could argue that losing teams outwork winning teams because guess what we've been taught? When we lose, what do we have to do the next week? We
Oh,
have to work harder,
we gotta work
double
harder. Got to do
down.
more conditioning, coach. We're just not in shape.
We're not in shape. We're not
Hold
tough
on, man.
We're
It's
enough.
not
probably because
tough.
we can't tackle and probably can't throw or catch. And
Yeah. Well, it's
that's
like,
good. It probably ain't
yeah.
because we didn't do enough
And
sprints
to
or
your
half
yeah,
sprints.
and to your point, coach, it's like you can't make decisions based off of that. Your emotions can't be made. We
Yeah.
lost. We're going to go full pads on Monday and turn it up, and
Well,
we
that's
won.
anger.
We're gonna be helmets on Monday. I
Yeah.
think I think it's
Nothing
all
science
loops
based
in.
about that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it loops into what you're saying, coach. It's and I I've enjoyed this whole episode so
Heck
far. Like
yeah.
it is just it is a refreshing reset of I love people that make me think outside the box and think about how I currently do things and how I could do them to be better. Cause that's what we created this for. And I'm hoping that everyone who listens is getting something out of it. Jamie, you want to hit rapid fire with coach?
Yeah, I do. And I was just thinking about this. This kind of popped in my head too. And I know that's one of your favorite statements, Dustin, when it pops into your head. But, um, you know, I want you to talk. I don't know. Maybe it's not a question, but I just feel for the strength coach. And thankfully, I'm not in this position. We have a really good working relationship with our head coach, and it's probably because I'm on the football staff. But it's like maybe the strength coach that wants to implement something like this doesn't have the buy-in from the head football coach. It's got to be one of the hardest, and I think that's where we start getting the sport coach and the strength coach kind of back and forth. And I think these are the kind of programs that when you implement these, and then the sport coach loses, there's just this. I don't know. There's a lot of tension there. So I just feel for those guys, but again, trying to articulate that, and I guess for that guy, how best what advice would you have for them, the strength coach in that scenario, from like a resource standpoint or a way to approach that situation?
Well, what you're talking about is a fundamental problem throughout anywhere that has S&C. Uh, there are football coaches that want to go sprint base whose S&C coach does not,
There you go. Yeah.
and vice versa.
Yep.
At Ravenwood, Tennessee, just south of Nashville, there's a guy named Dan Quesenberry who is a mature S&C coach, not a young guy, uh, but a mature S&C coach. He started doing Feed the Raptors 2 years ago, and when they started, they had 8 kids that could run 20 miles an hour. Now they have 54.
Wow.
That
Yeah.
is a
Like that right
wow.
there is just like,
You
hey,
are a different
yeah,
team.
yep,
Not only that, but they've gone 27-2 with 2 different head coaches who both were brought up, of course, traditionally, and he has had the power of persuasion. Part of it is I'm not gonna coach the other way. I'm
right,
not gonna prepare kids all summer in order to pass some stupid conditioning test.
right,
We're gonna get faster and stronger, more explosive. We're gonna jump higher, jump further. We're gonna throw things. We're gonna be better athletes. The kids are gonna love what they're doing, and because of all those things, by stacking performance level things, we will get into reasonable aerobic shape without doing anything that is truly aerobic, like a 5-mile run or 60 minutes of stadium stairs or something
right.
like that. We're not going to do any conditioning at all. Everything's going to be speed based. But if you practice really fast for an hour and a half, 4 or 5 times a week, you're going to be fit. I mean, that's going to
Yeah.
make you fit, and you're practicing the things that win games. So I really think that we're always in a battle for ideas and persuade. If you're a head coach and cannot persuade uh, a teenager that this is good for him, or a 23-year-old assistant coach that this is the right way, then your powers of persuasion are so bad that you're going to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You gotta be able to present the data,
you
and
have,
present.
and,
Yeah.
and I think data is really important, Coach Bolton. I mean, once you start speed training and can say 2 years ago we had 8 guys at 20 miles an hour, now we have 13 guys at 22 miles an hour. I mean, oh my
Yeah.
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah. Who's
I
gonna
mean,
argue against that? Yeah, it's
who's going to
impossible.
argue?
Yeah.
And then with the big cats, I don't know if you guys have heard of the truck stick or not,
Mm.
but the truck stick, okay, you'll love this, developed by Garrett Moeller. I mentioned him earlier, 55 and 5, Stewartville, Minnesota. He developed something called the truck stick. It's just the physics of momentum. So, Coach Martin, we would just weigh you and then time you in a 10-yard fly. That's all we have to do. But we're going to reward you for being a big, fast guy.
Mm.
What we have found is that when you take kilograms of weight, and anybody that's listening to this right now, if they reach out to me, I will send them a free spreadsheet that calculates all this for you. All you have to do is weigh the guy and time the guy. That's all you have to do. And so we take kilograms times meters per second, and we get newtons per second squared, or Newton seconds, I'm sorry. And what happens is, um, uh, a number of when Garrett first started doing it, he had 3 guys at 800. And I asked, "Are those guys good players?" And he said, "Oh, they're our best linemen. They're all conference. They all 3 of them are going to college to play football." And I said, "So if you had like 6 guys at 800, would you be pretty good?" He said, "Oh my God." Well, this year he had 17. This year he has 17. He has one guy over 1,000 this year.
Wow.
Oh, and by the way, Tristan Wirfs and like freaks like that in the NFL, their truck sticks like 1350.
Wow.
Good gracious.
Well,
So,
oh, go ahead, Coach. Go ahead.
yeah, all I'm saying is that if you are super big and super fast, all the skills that you need to be taught are pretty simple to learn. I mean, if you are
Yeah.
really big
It's
and really fast,
significantly easier to figure that out once you're
For
big
sure.
and fast.
yeah, it's
Easy,
not
But the
exactly.
data is driving it, and I think that's the biggest tool when you're articulating or trying to persuade is using data and saying, "Look," and even if they're not bought in now, I would say, and I'm sure your advice would be, start tracking it.
Mm.
Okay, how many guys do we have? Like we let's say we don't do feed the cats for this year. Let's track it, see where we are, and then say, "Coach, look, we need to be, we need to have this many guys over 20 miles an hour, blah, blah, blah." Then next year, "Hey, I think we need to implement this to improve this area of our program." And then start that process there, I think will be another one. I'm just talking to our listeners here, maybe thinking like, dang, this sounds awesome. I really want to
Mhm.
do this. How do I go about it? And kind of where to start. So I guess one of my rapid fires will be like, where would a guy like me start? Strength conditioning, I work with football. What resources do I need from Feed the Cats?
I sell stuff on CoachTube,
Okay.
and I'm the number one seller all time on CoachTube, so my stuff's pretty easy to find. I speak everywhere. I'm actually keynoting the NFL S&C Summit in Scottsdale in 3 weeks, which is a pretty bizarre thing to think about. That a high school track coach who was never a head football coach at the high school level is addressing the NFL on health,
Hmm.
because speed and health are synonymous. That as you get faster, you get healthier. As you get slower, you're not as healthy. So you follow me on Twitter. I'm across all platforms. I have a lot of free stuff on YouTube, and I answer all emails and things like that.
Well, you jumped on our podcast too, so we're excited about that.
Yeah,
So we know
we
you're
definitely are.
passionate about it and all that.
Yeah.
Dustin.
Coach, kind of what, this whole episode's been talking about max intent, max effort, sprint based. So what is your belief on changing the sprinting condition? And what I mean by that is there any benefit to max velocity or max sprinting, max intent up a hill in a different condition, like a sand pit, resistance on you while you're trying to sprint? is all of that when you see it like, man, that's pointless. We need to do what we do, sprint on flat turf. Talk a little bit about changing the condition of the sprint.
That's a wildly big question.
Yeah.
Sand is, I don't like sand.
Okay.
Because the key to sprinting is really short ground contact times.
Okay.
So we don't want to like sink.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a hill, if you're running 200 meters up the hill, that will make you slower.
Mm.
Now, if you sprint for 10 meters up a hill that is sprintable, not a mountain, but a sprintable hill, you go up for 10 meters, you walk back down, you rest a couple minutes, and you do it again. You do it 3 or 4 times. That's very, very supplemental to speed because that's acceleration based. If you are doing things like a 1080 sprint, not many people have them because they cost $17,000, but it's basically a high data producing overspeed and resistance machine. And that in itself will not make you faster, but it's very, very good as a supplement. The shred mill. I'm a good friend with Tony Villani, and the shred mill is once again fantastic for supplemental speed. Now, if you're doing those things and never spiking up and getting on a fast surface and getting timed, I think you're leaving the most important thing behind. But I do think that those things, it's like the weight room. The weight room will never make you faster. That's just my belief. I know it hurts a lot of feelings. Now, am I saying the weight room is not worth it? No, you've got every good athlete in every sport. And I would say the weaker you are, the more important it is. Like if you're a track 15-year-old, a track girl, you need to get in the weight room. And I think the weight room is very, very important, but it's supplemental to speed. And I don't mean to hurt feelings. I want all my sprinters to be strong. I want them all to lift, but I cannot go in the weight room and see somebody lifting in any type of lift and say that guy is going to be my 4x1 because I see slow guys that can do lifting just as well.
Right. And I guess what you're saying is like, you can't just say, well, coach, we don't need to feed the cats. We don't need to have a sprint based system because we lift weights. Like I think that's the message. It's like, no, that's not what we really need to sprint to be fast, and we need to lift weights to be strong and powerful or whatever. Right. So I think
it's so small.
Mm-hmm.
The dosages are so small. Right. You don't have to, I don't think you should ever crush kids in the weight room in season, but
no.
Or I don't even like crushing kids in the summer in the weight room. You should never burn the steak. You should never ruin the next day. If you ever crush them, make sure you do it on Friday so they have 2 days off. But I really think that you can do everything you want to do with the exception of burning the steak. You cannot practice 4 hours and feed the cats.
Right.
You've got to limit practice. And by the way, anytime you take the quantity and squeeze it, you improve the quality.
Minimum effective dose. Love it. Coach, this has been an outstanding episode. I know I've learned a ton. I'm going to start diving into Feed the Cats. I think that's what we're going to do at our program. So for guys listening, I'm all in for sure. And, but no, it's been great.
I'll send you a couple videos.
Thank you.
Yes,
awesome.
That would be awesome. Guys, Coach's stuff will be linked in the show notes. Make sure to check him out, especially on CoachTube. He's got tons of free content out there. Coach, we're super thankful. We appreciate the opportunity to get to speak with you, and we love bringing guys on here like you because you just shook up the whole Coach Speak ecosystem podcast world. I'll tell you that. So I think there's going to be a lot of coaches who hear this that will be grateful to hear you speak.
Well, it improves the lives of coaches, and I'll end it with this. I've gotten 2 letters from coaches' wives saying that I saved their marriage.
That
Think
right
about
there
that
might
one.
be worth it. That's worth it.
Think about it.
Yep.
I mean, it's
wow.
Yeah, you want coaches to have healthy family. I think a healthy, well-rested, sober coach is a better coach the next day.
Yes, sir. I don't think anybody's going to argue with that.
Nope.
Awesome, guys. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Thanks for tuning into the Coach Speak podcast. If you're interested in being a guest speaker on the show, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at coachspeakpodcast1@gmail.com. And if you have a question for our Q&A segment, don't forget to submit it through the form in the episode description. We appreciate your support. and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.